The little girl tugged his sleeve, stared at the woman across the crowded store, and whispered 2 words that froze his breath in his chest. The music kept playing. Shoppers kept moving. Snow melted on boots. But in that instant, the past and the present collided, and nothing would ever feel the same again. Before we keep going, if stories like this move you, take a second to subscribe to Kindness Tales. It helps us share more moments of hope and human connection. And as you listen, feel free to like the video and tell us what you would have done in the comments. Christmas Eve had never been loud for him. It used to be years ago, filled with family dinners and late-night laughter. But life had narrowed since then. Now it was quieter, smaller, shaped around routines and responsibility. He was a single dad in his mid-30s, living in a modest suburban townhouse with creaky stairs and a front porch light that flickered when the wind picked up. His world revolved around his 6-year-old daughter, her school drop-offs, her uneven ponytails, and the way she still reached for his hand when crossing the street. That afternoon, he bundled her into a puffy red coat that made her look like a walking ornament. She insisted on wearing mismatched gloves, because one had a snowman and the other had a reindeer, and she said they were best friends who didn't like to be separated. He smiled, pretending not to notice the hole in one fingertip, and grabbed the short list they'd written. Together, milk, bread, apples, hot chocolate. A small stuffed bear she'd circled twice in the store flyer. Money was tight, but Christmas mattered, not in the big, shiny way, but in the quiet traditions they were building. Pancakes shaped like stars. A real tree, even if it was small and leaned a little to the left. A promise that even when things were hard, they were together. The grocery store parking lot was packed, headlights glowing in the early dusk. Inside, everything smelled like pine wreaths and sugar cookies. Music drifted from the ceiling, the same songs he'd heard since childhood, now carrying a bittersweet edge. He lifted his daughter into the cart when she got tired, her boots dangling as she hummed along to the music, making up her own words. As they moved through the aisles, he felt that familiar mix of gratitude and ache. Gratitude for her laughter, ache for the life that had once included someone else pushing the cart beside him. He didn't let himself linger there. He focused on comparing prices, counting items, keeping his smile steady. They were near the checkout lanes when it happened. He was reaching for a box of cocoa when his daughter went suddenly still. Her humming stopped. Her small hand tightened around his sleeve. He looked down at her, about to ask what was wrong when she pointed. Not dramatically, just a small, certain gesture. Her eyes were wide, curious, unafraid. That was when she said those 2 words. "Mommy there."
The world tilted. He followed her gaze, heart pounding harder with each step of his breath, until he saw her standing by the floral display. Older, thinner, her hair shorter than he remembered. She was holding a basket instead of a cart, studying a row of poinsettias like they held answers. His ex-wife. They hadn't planned this. They lived in different towns now. Different lives. Their separation had been quiet but painful, the kind that comes from exhaustion rather than anger. Missed conversations, long silences, decisions made too late. She had left when their daughter was barely a year old. Chasing stability she felt she couldn't find at home. At least that was how it felt back then. Contact had been rare. Birthday cards mailed with careful handwriting. A check once returned unopened. He told himself it was easier this way, cleaner, less confusing for everyone. But there she was, 5 aisles away, unaware that the child she used to rock to sleep was now pointing at her from a shopping cart. He didn't move. Fear and longing wrestled inside him. He wondered if she would recognize them. If she would want to. He wondered what he would say if she turned around. He wondered how to explain the hole in the glove, the way life had shrunk and grown all at once. His daughter didn't wait for his answer. She waved, small hand high in the air, pure joy on her face. The woman turned. Recognition spread slowly across her expression, like dawn after a long night. Her hand flew to her mouth. For a second she looked like she might run. Instead she stood there, eyes filling, knees locked, as if afraid to move would break something fragile. People passed between them with carts and baskets. Unaware, They were walking through the middle of a moment that had been years in the making. He pushed the cart forward, legs unsteady. When they stopped a few feet apart, neither knew where to look first. At each other. At the child. At the floor. The little girl solved it by leaning forward and saying hello, cheerful and loud, telling her about school and snow days and the bear she wanted for Christmas. She didn't know the weight of the silence she was cutting through. She only knew this face felt familiar in her bones. Her mother knelt slowly, eyes never leaving her daughter's. She said her name like a prayer, like something she'd been afraid to forget. She apologized without explaining, thanked without asking, and listened as her daughter talked about pancakes and gloves and best friend animals. He watched from above, emotions tangling. He felt protective and resentful and relieved all at once. He also felt something else he hadn't expected. Compassion. They moved to a quieter corner near the greeting cards. Words came carefully at first. Polite questions. How have you been? You look well. She told him she was back in town for the holidays. Working 2 jobs now, finally steady enough to breathe.
She said she thought about reaching out 100 times and never felt brave enough. He told her about kindergarten and loose teeth and how their daughter loved bedtime stories but hated brushing her hair. He didn't accuse. He didn't defend. He just spoke. A line formed behind them, but no one complained. An older woman nearby pretended to read cards while discreetly wiping her eyes. Kindness sometimes shows up as patience from strangers who sense something important is happening. When it was time to part, it felt wrong to simply walk away. His daughter hugged her mother tightly, arms fierce and forgiving. He expected questions, tears, maybe anger later. Instead, she smiled up at him and asked if Mommy could come see the tree sometime. He looked at his ex-wife, searching for pressure, for expectation. He found only hope mixed with fear. He nodded. Christmas Eve night was quieter than usual, but lighter somehow. He tucked his daughter into bed, listening as she retold the meeting like a fairy tale, full of wonder and certainty. He sat on the edge of her bed long after she fell asleep, staring at the glow of the tree, thinking about the courage it takes to stay and the courage it takes to return. The next afternoon, there was a knock at the door. Snow dusted the porch. His ex-wife stood there holding a small gift bag, hands shaking. Inside was the stuffed bear from the flyer, bought after she'd seen them in the store, but before she'd known if she'd ever get the chance to give it. They spent Christmas quietly. No big speeches, no fixing the past, just shared moments. Hot chocolate, laughter when the tree lights flickered out and had to be fixed with tape. A family shaped differently than before, but still real. Kindness didn't erase the years apart. It didn't solve everything. What it did was open a door that had been locked by fear. It reminded 3 people that love can pause, stumble, and still find its way back into the room. In the weeks that followed, routines shifted. Not perfectly, not easily, but with intention. Phone calls replaced silence. Visits replaced assumptions. A child gained more truth, not less. Looking back, he often thought about those 2 words in the grocery store. How small they were, how powerful, how they carried no blame, only recognition. Sometimes kindness arrives not as a grand gesture, but as a simple truth spoken aloud. If there's one thing this story leaves behind, it's the reminder that compassion can soften even the hardest history. That giving someone space to step forward can change more than forcing them to stay away. And that children, with their honest hearts, often lead us where we're afraid to go. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs a little hope. And in the comments, tell us about a moment when kindness surprised you. You never know whose life might change because you chose to open a door instead of keeping it closed.